Hi and welcome to November's video tarot forecast. You can tell it's November because of the hat. I woke up this morning, ice all over the car, couldn't get the car door open to take my son on the school run, and the weather has basically stayed. It's beautiful but freezing, so I am trying to keep warm, and so yes, a particularly wintry video tarot forecast for today. So I have shuffled the cards, set my intentions. I'm just going to do a quick recap for those of you who are new to the video tarot forecast, just to talk about the various card positions. So the way that it works is that the card on the left is really the foundational card. That's the card that explains something to do with what it is, the circumstances either within inside you or outside you that are bringing you into the current circumstances. So it's something that's going to be connected to what's going on in the present day, or the current cosmic weather, as I say, which is the second card. So we're quite interested, or I'm interested in seeing how those two cards interact with each other, what you bring into what it is that is happening now. And then that builds up a kind of picture as to what it is that the pervasive feeling of what's coming up, but also the circumstances, possibly even coming down to particular circumstances, particular characters that might be there. We'll see. It can be general, it can be specific. It might be a relatively general reading, but you might be able to pick up on particularly specific instances of how it's playing out in your life. And then finally, the third card that I like to do is the one that gives back, hopefully, some agency to you, so that you're not simply receiving a reading, but you're also participating in it. And that is going to be the tool, the card that you are able to use in some way, apply in some way, in order to meet with and make the most of, or to mitigate the cosmic weather, given the fact that you're coming in with a particular foundational feel as well. So that's the foundation card on the left, the current weather in the center, and then the card that you can use, the tool, on the right. So I'm going to draw the cards now. Feel like I need to draw from the middle of the deck and go from left to right. And the foundational card for this month is the Six of Discs, or success. So to me, that speaks of building something. As you can see, it is a particularly literal representation of building a structure that you can work from. Discs are, they are to do with our everyday physical life. They are to do with everything that we interact with in our everyday world. It's not to do with emotions, it's not to do with thoughts. Those will play into it, as will our intuition. They're all the basis, but the discs are particularly concerned with what we can interact with our five senses. So in some way, you have, whether you know it or not, built some kind of strong, solid foundation in order to move forward in a particular way. It may be that it is a financial foundation, you may have accrued some savings, it may be that you have co-created some kind of structure, whether that's in the form of a business or some kind of organization that's less formal, a partnership, an agreement with people, and it will be with others. As you can see here, you've got the multiple figures on the top of the discs. And really, it sets the stage for something that you build from. So I like the fact that the figures in this card are looking out towards the future. It very much sets the scene for our reading today. So you have material resources. It may not be money, but it will be material resources, and those resources may be human in form, as I was saying. So if it is something that you're not aware of, then it might be something that the cards are drawing your attention to look at where it is that you might actually have the kind of material resources that you perhaps haven't noticed yet. And they will be significant, they're substantial, they're solid. As you can see, there is a sense of balance in this card, a sense of balance and harmony, and I do love the colours as well. So there is something here, particularly also with the light source, that is strong but not overpowering, but the figures are sort of lifted up, elevated to meet that light source. So there's a certain sense of adjoining, or being able to meet whatever it is that's coming at us in terms of what it is that's coming into consciousness, what it is that's having a light shined on it. There's a very strong sense of direction as well. So really, yes, if you can't see what it is that's there, then perhaps what this card is drawing your attention to is to look at what foundations it is that you may be taking for granted that actually are going to serve you very well when we move into the current situation. So the current situation, which I haven't turned over yet, but I'm going to do now, beautiful, another disc card, the Ace of Discs. I'm going to put these two together because there really is quite a balance between the two cards, as you can see. So there's both that triangle shape, obviously the presence of the discs. What's interesting is that then the 6 discs and the multiple figures are replaced by a single disc and a lone figure, and the light source has gone from being far more diffuse to far more specific. It may seem more distant, but it's also something that seems to be more able to be gotten hold of or handle of, being able to see it. Perhaps it's more distinct what it is that you're working towards. So the way that this plays out for me in terms of the reading is that you have these physical resources. They are a foundation, and they may be a springboard from which you have to step into something that feels much less to do with collaboration and more to do with something that you do yourself. There will be the presence of what it is that's supporting you, but they're not going to be with you necessarily in the same kind of way. They are very much the foundation here. And then the Ace of Discs is the stepping into something else. So it's solo disc, solo person, a very clear star. They line up. There is a sense of being ready, lined up to meet something. And the Ace of Discs, again, we're in the realm of discs, but what we're doing with the Ace of Discs is it's actually almost a reboot or a restarting, or not necessarily a restarting what you've already done, but using what you've done to take steps into new territory. And it does ask for a particular kind of faith that something is going to meet you, that you make a decision, and the decision to do something may not necessarily be based on something that you can see. There may be an element of a risk to the project or venture, but the thing about the Ace of Discs is, and aces, they are really an all or nothing thing. They are all and nothing and everything in between, because aces are the blueprint, they're the prototype for their particular suit. So the Ace of Discs is the prototype or blueprint for everything that is material. So the Ace of Discs, in some respects, people, I think that there's a sense of people resting back on their laurels. So Ace of Discs, I don't need to do anything. And for some very few people, they can almost see it manifesting immediately, and then there it is. So there is, it's already happened, that sense of manifestation. But I think for many of us, what we do is we look at the Ace of Discs and we think, oh, well, yes, there's nothing that we need to do. But actually aces, because of their non-incarnate quality, means that we do need to do something to bring them in. It may be that we've already done the groundwork. It may be that this foundational card with the 6 of Discs is the groundwork that is able to then form some kind of playing field for which then this new thing emerges into awareness and into tangible reality. Something that you've worked towards, and then you've put in the sweat equity, and you've worked with people, you've collaborated, you've got your plan, you've got the support to see it through, and then this thing comes through. But sometimes there may be that pause between having done this and then wondering if anything's actually going to happen. The Ace of Discs hints to the fact that yes, something can happen, but it may also require you to act before you know, to act on something, a hunch, or something that isn't necessarily present immediately, but you know that you've worked towards it to an extent that that it's not a foolish risk that you're taking. It's just sometimes it's the risk of perhaps making a fool of yourself, which is slightly different from a foolish risk. A foolish risk is one that's ungrounded, unfounded, and doesn't have any sense of anything other than wishful thinking, perhaps. But whereas the true fool's risk in tarot is to take that step into the unknown, knowing that there is something there to hold you, or going into it with a sense of innocence, with beginner's mind, which is sort of paradoxical given the fact that all of this preparation work, or there is this foundational aspect to it. So it's not entirely beginner's mind. But I think that here it's with the sense of possibility. So there's been planning. Have a plan, you've made a plan, you've done as much as you can, but now you shift into the realm of possibility and also the realm of receptiveness or receptivity, because in order, discs are feminine in nature, so talking about the feminine in all of us, that idea of receptivity, of waiting, of pregnancy, of potential and possibility, of gestating something that may not necessarily come through immediately. But as you know, gestation suggests there has been a fair amount of preparation work up until then. So it's not as if it's just coming out of nowhere. It's not an immaculate conception. It is that something has been conceived of, but now it is that receptivity to know when to act. So the waiting, the sensation, and then the knowing, and then the acting, the taking, the assuming of something, the reaching out and taking something that then comes up to or forward to meet you. So I'm going to show you the Ace of Discs again, without the light shining on it, hopefully. Got enough light on the card as it is. But you can see that sense of the waiting and perhaps the distance, a sense of distance, like, can I even meet this? Is this even possible? That star feels so distant. But the reminder here is that the star is intimately and intricately connected with who you are. And then what the figure will possibly not be aware of is this phenomenally powerful foundation underneath them, which is then that disc, and that is the potential, the pure potential. So the star out there that feels so distant is actually far closer, because it's closer to its earthbound realization. It's right under your feet. And I think that might be part of what needs to be said here. It is right under your feet. And in fact, sometimes things can be so far under our feet that we don't see them, or that we're practically falling over before we notice them. We're falling over them. So if you're not entirely sure what it is that is coming through, or if you're ever going to get what it is that's coming through, then perhaps the idea is to note if you are looking at something way out there and feeling that sense of distance, rather than connecting to something that's much closer. And with the Ace, there are no guarantees. With any of the tarot cards, there are no guarantees. This is not about me sitting here and promising you wealth and riches, or, you know, and things like that. But what it is it speaks of potentials. And particularly with the Aces, that really is, I'm speaking of the potentials of potentials. So this, but it's not, you have done the work. So there is the potential then for something to come through. And the potential for something really rather, that can be really rather great to come through as well. It is the birth of something that has been, you know, in its planning stages for a long time. But as I said, there's that idea of the combination of receptivity and risk and waiting. So that's what's going on with the first two cards, your foundation, the current weather. Here's your tool. This is the tool that you are looking at. The Emperor, assume authority, go for it. You've got discs, two lots of disc cards, feminine cards, receptivity. Yes, there is the Six of Discs, which is work, but then you've got this very action-orientated, very regal-looking Emperor who is there and looking in the other direction. So he's looking off towards the future. There's something here about being able to look into the future and even if not necessarily to see what's going on, because again, it's about the Ace of Discs, it might not necessarily be manifest, and it may be that you need to sort of step up and be Emperor-like before you command it in. So there's the receptivity and then the command. there is the sense of taking charge of something. It may be that there is going to be an opportunity where you do need to take charge. The Emperor is Aries. It's very much a self-defining card. It is a card of not waiting for others to define. In fact, waiting for others to define you is the antithesis of the Emperor. The Emperor doesn't look to anyone else. He isn't trying to be anyone else other than to be himself. And the assertion of who he is as himself is really his raison d'etre. It's why he's here. The Emperor as an archetype is the assumption of authority. It's the assumption of earthly authority. So we're back again in the land of everything physical. The Emperor is not particularly interested in spiritual authority. That's not to say that there isn't a spiritual foundation to this. There's a spiritual dimension to all of us, whether we're aware of it or not. It's just in the case of the Emperor, he is more interested in what it is that's taking place in this tangible world that defines him and that he can seek to define, and where he imposes order on it through the rule of law. And remember that he sets the laws. It's not about divine laws. It's not that to the exclusion of divine laws. I'm not saying that, but this is my world, this is my plan, this is the direction I'm going in, this is how I'm calling the shots. And not only that, but it's then stepping up to that kind of belief. So it's not simply like, this is my world, my plan, and then not doing anything about it and then expecting somebody else to come and do all of that for you. No, the true Emperor is the rule of law, it's the rule of human law, but then so the true Emperor follows through. He assumes authority, he assumes responsibility for what's going on as well. So he takes the fall if there's the failure, and he also is the one who celebrates and is celebrated when there's a success. It rests on his shoulders. So very much there's a tremendous amount of responsibility that comes with the Emperor card, but then that responsibility comes because he's the Emperor. It doesn't come at you, this sense of responsibility, unless you are able to own it, and unless you're able to take responsibility. And this is a particularly authoritative card, perhaps in the time of uncertainty of, is this going to work out? Well, whether it does or it doesn't, I think that the tool here is to be Emperor-like in the face of whatever it is that transpires or does not transpire, and to take action when you need to, and to look for the gap and to take it. So after the receptivity, after that sense of waiting and patience and trust and faith, then there is the going for it. So I love the juxtaposition of the feminine and the masculine in this. And because he's looking off to the right, there is an element of mystery to it. His goal is not within the scope of this reading. So our reading is not really particularly concerned with what it is that you need to do in the future. The future will take care of itself, because the Emperor is really directing the course of the future, and also witnessing the course of the future, in which he is being asked to exercise some agency. In the meantime, it's really about taking what it is that is there, noticing it first, taking it and using it in a way that is unapologetic, but also with the admonishment or the statement of what kind of emperor do you want to be? Because if you go back, for instance, into Roman history, there were emperors. You know, there was Julius Caesar, and then there was Nero. You know, so different kinds of emperors, sense of rulership. Octavian, another emperor. So looking at what kind of emperor are you going to be. Is it going to be about assuming authority? Is it going to be about the fact that everyone else has to pay for your mistakes? And also, how are you going to work with success? Particularly given the fact, and we'll go back to this, the first card at the end, because this what it is that you are building has not been entirely a solo effort. It may be that you're being asked to step up to a certain amount on your own now, but there is then the remembrance that there are other people here. This is a collective as well. So there is that balance between going it alone, but then also understanding that if it weren't for what happened in the Six and the support of others, that really the Emperor may not have been able to assume that lovely ermine mantle that he does assume. So I hope that is useful. As always, I would love your feedback, questions, comments if something doesn't make sense. Otherwise, I will see you on Patreon, and the next video tarot forecast will be at the beginning of December. Take good care.